Day 6 of the Hormuz blockade. The frigates are gone. The small corvettes are gone too. By any conventional military standard, Iran's surface navy has almost ceased to exist as a real fighting force. But that is not a reason to breathe easy. A navy with nothing left to lose does not back down. It throws in everything it has left. And what it has left does not necessarily look like a weapon. An IRGC PACAP-class fast attack craft weighs about 14 tons, carries 2 anti-ship missiles, and can race across calm water at 52 knots. It does not need to survive the battle. It only needs 4 minutes of confusion and 1 clean shot at a $2 billion destroyer. The Strait of Hormuz is only 21 nautical miles wide. The blockade forces U.S. Navy warships to sit right in the middle of about 500 civilian vessels in order to intercept traffic. And tonight, Iran is not sending just one lone boat. It is opening with a coordinated multi-domain attack. Along Iran's coastline and on Abu Musa and the Tons Islands, shore-based anti-ship missile batteries such as Noor, Qadr, and Khalij Fars are positioned to saturate the entire strait from multiple directions at once. Beneath the shallow water are Ghadir-class midget submarines, at least 23 of them in service, hiding in places where hull-mounted sonar struggles to tell the difference between a submarine and a reef. In the air, waves of Shahed series suicide drones are launched from mobile platforms, skimming just above the water at an altitude where radar clutter hides them until the final mile. And inside a cluster of fishing boats about 5 nautical miles from the blockade line are 30 PACAP fast attack craft, each carrying 2 Nasser-1 anti-ship missiles with a radar cross-section almost indistinguishable from a wooden fishing boat. Behind them is a Shahed Soleimani-class stealth corvette, serving as the command and control node for the entire assault. From the moment the first boat breaks formation, engines roaring, speed rising from 10 to 52 knots, the kill chain has only 4 minutes to finish. In those 4 minutes, the defending force has to detect the acceleration among 500 contacts, identify it correctly as a threat, assign the right weapon, and destroy it before the missile leaves the rail. Miss that beat, and the Nasser-1 launches. 4 minutes, 240 seconds. That is the real villain in this story. Not Iran, not politics, not strategy. Time and the physical limits of reaction inside confined water. If this kind of technical analysis is what draws your attention, then this is what matters most. Every weapon system the United States Navy has spent 70 years refining was built for blue water combat, on the open ocean, where standoff distance stretches to hundreds of nautical miles. In the Pacific, an Aegis system may have 20 minutes or more to detect an incoming target, classify it, confirm intent, choose a weapon, and fire. Time favors the defender. But at Hormuz, that entire equation flips. The span between a target accelerating and a missile being in the air is compressed down to just 4 minutes. And inside those 4 minutes, the kill chain must clear 4 steps, each one a possible breaking point. The first step is detecting the threat among 500 different contacts. Radar sees every dhow, every tanker, every wave crest. A PACAP boat looks like nothing unusual until it starts moving abnormally. The second step is identifying it correctly. Is that a fisherman punching the throttle to chase a school of tuna, or a combat craft sprinting into missile range? A mistake here is not just a tactical error. If you fire on a civilian vessel, it becomes a political disaster big enough to collapse the entire blockade. The third step is assigning the right weapon to the right target and the right launch platform. Not just any weapon, but the one best suited to that class of target, from the proper platform without interfering with 29 other engagements happening at the same time. The final step is killing the target before the Nasser-1 leaves the rail. If even one link takes too long, the entire chain breaks. The swarm fires, the coastal batteries launch the next salvo, and the destroyer immediately shifts from hunter to hunted. That is the real engineering problem, not firepower. The United States Navy has more than enough firepower. What it lacks is time, and a combat architecture good enough to compress what is normally a 20-minute decision cycle into 240 seconds. Of the three directions that must be handled, the hardest one is spotting a 14-ton boat hiding among 500 other contacts. The most powerful surface radar ever put on a warship is the AN/SPY-6 on the Arleigh Burke Flight 3 destroyer. Testing confirmed that it outperforms the older AN/SPY-1D by a factor of 100, roughly a 20 decibel improvement in sensitivity. But at Hormuz, physics still wins. The radar horizon formula is simple. Distance in nautical miles equals 1.23 times the square root of antenna height in feet. SPY-6 sits about 50 feet above the water. The hard detection limit for a small boat is only about 9 nautical miles. Atmospheric ducting may stretch that to 12, even 15 nautical miles. But in dense, real-world clutter, with hundreds of returns bouncing off islands, masts, and wave tops, pulling a clean track out at that range is an entirely different problem. The radar that truly solves this problem is not on the destroyer. It is on the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, orbiting at 25,000 feet. By the same formula, its radar horizon reaches about 195 nautical miles. The AN/APY-9 radar looks down from above, so the curvature of the Earth is no longer the limiting factor. A small boat 5 nautical miles from a destroyer can be seen by the Hawkeye from nearly 200 nautical miles away. But seeing it does not mean you can shoot it. The destroyer needs data of high enough quality for fire control, and that is where CEC, cooperative engagement capability, changes the entire combat architecture. CEC transmits raw radar returns in real time, not just processed reports. The Aegis system on the destroyer fuses E-2D data with its own SPY-6 returns to create a composite track with greater accuracy than either sensor alone. The result is that the destroyer sees what the Hawkeye sees, at quality good enough to fire, even when the target is still below the destroyer's own radar horizon. That capability is called engage on remote, meaning firing based on data from an outside sensor. A destroyer can launch an SM-6 at a target its own radar has never directly seen, relying entirely on E-2D data so that the missile's active seeker acquires the target in the terminal phase. In 1988, during Operation Praying Mantis, USS Wainwright shot down the Iranian patrol boat Jashan with SM-1 missiles using its own organic radar. One ship, a few minutes of reaction time, one single target. But in 2026, against 30 boats charging in at once, that model no longer scales. Engage on remote does. Even so, this detection layer has a deadly weak point. If the E-2D is taken out of the fight by a Bavar 373 missile, by a mechanical failure, or simply by the math of flight hours, then 200 nautical miles of early warning collapses to 15. The 4-minute window almost disappears. Iran understands that very well. At the 60-second mark, the detection layer has identified 3 targets accelerating out of the fission cluster. At that point, the question is no longer, do we shoot, but what do we shoot with? And the answer depends on a calculation most people never think about. How do you match the right weapon to the right target when the magazine cannot be reloaded at sea? Almost every weapon on hand can kill a PACOP boat. The issue is not lethality. It is wartime economics. The Navy calls this principle distributed lethality. Put simply, do not use a $4 million missile to kill a target that a $100,000 rocket can handle, because every expensive round you fire is one less round available for the target that truly requires it. The magazine is finite. So the kill web has to be layered, using the cheapest option first and escalating only when the target forces you to. Against the swarm, the first responders are not even anti-ship missiles. One MH-60R Seahawk helicopter can carry 8 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. Millimeter wave radar seeker, fire and forget, roughly $115,000 per round. One Hellfire for one boat. One helicopter can take out 8 targets. Below Hellfire is APKWS, a laser-guided rocket costing about $30,000 per shot. Accurate enough to hit a boat hull from 2 miles away and cheap enough to use freely. $30,000 for one boat. That is no longer just a number on a budget sheet. That is the price of one more day with the blockade still holding. If one boat punches through to close range, the next defensive layer is the 30mm Mark 38 chain gun with automated tracking. Then the 57mm Mark 110, and the final layer is the Phalanx CIWS Block 1B, upgraded for surface targets, firing 20mm tungsten rounds at ranges under 1 nautical mile. The key point is that none of those systems touch the VLS cells. An Arleigh Burke carries 96 Mark 41 cells. Those cells have to be shared by SM-6, SM-2, ESSM, Tomahawk, and ASROC. The exact number of SM-6 missiles is classified, but it is certainly finite and part of a zero-sum trade-off. Every SM-6 fired at a surface target is one less available for air defense. That is why SM-6 has to be reserved for targets that justify its $4.3 million price tag. A Shahid Soleimani-class corvette, 80 nautical miles away. A Ghadir submarine surfacing to launch torpedoes. Or a wave of Shahid drones that Hellfire cannot intercept. Mach 3.5, enabled by CEC and engage on remote, it is the fastest response in the arsenal, but also the most expensive. For heavier targets, such as the stealth corvette commanding the swarm or a coastal missile battery, the Navy shifts to dedicated anti-ship missiles. The Harpoon AGM-84 costs about $1.4 million, uses active radar homing, carries a 488-pound warhead, and has proven itself over more than 4 decades. But it is not stealthy and is becoming increasingly vulnerable to electronic warfare. The LRA SMAGM-158C is more expensive, around $3.24 to $4 million. A stealth cruise missile with a range beyond 200 nautical miles, a 1,000-pound penetrator warhead, autonomous guidance using imaging infrared, passive RF sensing, inertial navigation, and the ability to function even when GPS is denied. Against a heavily defended target, it is almost a guaranteed kill. But inventory is limited, and it can only be launched from aircraft such as the F/A-18. At the bottom of the cost curve is QuickSync, a JDAM variant fitted with a seeker for maritime targets, costing about $70,000 at production scale. It sinks ships through the physics of underwater detonation. It is not effective against defended targets, but against a blockade runner with no air defense, it turns a bomb into an extremely cheap ship killer. What matters here is that all of these weapons do not come from one single platform. Hellfire is fired from a helicopter. SM-6 is fired from a destroyer. LRA-SM is launched from a fighter. QuickSync can be dropped from an Air Force F-15E. So how do they coordinate fires against 30 different targets inside the same 4-minute window without stepping on each other? Or worse, shooting each other? No officer can stand at a whiteboard and assign 30 weapon target pairings in 240 seconds. The math moves too fast for people. It requires a combat architecture. That architecture is NIFC-CA, Naval Integrated Fire Control Counter-Air. Even though the name sounds like it is only for air defense, in reality, it is not limited to that. NIFC-CA ties E2D, Aegis, F/A18, and MH-60R into one unified fire control network. CEC passes the sensor picture. Aegis computes the weapon target solution. Then the system automatically assigns each threat to the launch platform best positioned to engage it. Hellfire for a boat 3 nautical miles away. SM-6 for a corvette at 80 nautical miles. LRASM for a coastal missile battery beyond the horizon. QuickSync for a blockade runner in the Air Force's lane. When the fight extends beyond the Navy's own scope, for example, when an F-15E carrying QuickSync needs targeting data from a Navy E-2D, JADC2 comes into play. This is a unified, joint, all-domain command and control architecture that bridges the gap between services. One common picture, one engagement solution. Multiple shooters. Against a defended target, the strike follows the salvo combat model described by naval strategist Wayne Hughes, coordinated missile waves timed to arrive on target at the same moment. LRASM launches first because it is slower but stealthier, forcing the defender to commit countermeasures. A harpoon salvo follows to add volume and multiple approach angles. SM-6 launches last at Mach 3.5, so the full weight of fire lands in one extremely tight instant. At that point, the defender is facing a wall of threats coming from different directions, at different speeds, with different types of seekers. From the first E2D detection to the moment the weapons hit together can still fit inside 240 seconds. Somewhere aboard a destroyer no one wants to name, a watch officer will see 4 target tracks disappear from the screen in the same half-second. At Hormuz, that is what victory looks like. 4 minutes of engineering with almost zero margin for error. But the kill web is not a chain. A chain is linear. Break one link and the whole thing collapses. A kill web is a network. If the E2D goes down, the F-35B can take over the CEC relay role. If the F/A18 runs out of LAS, SM-6 fills the gap. If Hellfire is depleted, deck guns take over the close-in layer. Redundancy is built into every layer. But redundancy runs on magazine depth, and magazine depth is finite. That is the weakness the IRGC exploits, not through superior technology, but through arithmetic. Picture Iran launching 30 boats out of Bandar Abbas every night. The kill web handles all 30. More Hellfire is gone, more APKWs is burned. Deck gun ammunition drops. Everything works. Every boat is destroyed. But tomorrow night, another 30 come out. Boats are expendable. Magazines are not. At some point, and the exact figure sits at the highest classification level in the 5th Fleet, the destroyer has to rotate back to port to rearm. When it leaves station, a gap opens in the blockade line. Iran does not need to sink a destroyer. It only needs to empty one. That is why the weapons ladder matters more than any single weapon on it. Every boat killed with a $30,000 APKWs instead of a $4.3 million SM-6 means one more VLS cell preserved. Every blockade runner sunk with a $70,000 QuickSync instead of a $3 million LAS means one more night the blockade can hold without rotating forces. The kill web does not win because it is the strongest. It wins because it is the most economical, stretching the magazine across weeks, months, even entire campaign seasons. Hellfire is not just a weapon. It is the economic sustainment tool for the whole campaign. QuickSync is not just a bomb. It is the reason a destroyer can stay on station 30 days longer. The kill web works. Every engagement proves it. Hellfire kills the swarm. SM-6 handles threats beyond the horizon. LRAS pushes through jamming to finish heavy targets. QuickSync kills at astonishingly low cost. Physics guarantees every link in that network. But physics also guarantees something else. 96 VLS cells are finite. Every night the IRGC pushes 30 boats into the strait. The kill web burns through ammunition the blockade still needs for the next 6 months. Every engagement is a victory, but every victory has a cost, and that cost cannot be replaced at sea. In the end, the IRGC does not need to sink the destroyer. It only needs to make it leave. And that is the biggest question in this entire equation. At what point does a perfect kill web, a network that wins every engagement, run out of ammunition before the blockade runs out of time? The answer is not secret in the conceptual sense. It is secret because it is a number. And somewhere in the Fifth Fleet, someone is watching that number count down, one swarm at a time.